Well, good evening to everybody who's here. And there are five of us in the room tonight as Kansas City Metro is under a tornado watch. We've learned over the years not to worry about tornado watches because they rarely materialize into anything important. I pray that the weather wherever you are is temperate and that you're comfortable with your favorite beverage or whatever, all set to go with you as we begin our class time together. Speaking of favorite beverage, oh yeah, I see mine right over there and I can get it. So let's pray. I spent a beautiful day today, and one of the things that made it beautiful was my constant awareness of the abundant universe that I live in. Everything I did today, and it was mostly indoor work on things that need doing, reminded me of the abundance that we live in. And part of it was my own work, which is helpful to people, but part of it was nature, where I saw so much abundance. I saw abundant rain. I saw abundant bird life. And I'm sure that there's a nest in a tree right about my roof line. I haven't seen it yet, but the birds that fly by the window seem to be on a mission. So all around us we can see abundance, or if we choose to, we can see problems. As for me, I choose to see abundance, and I pray that you do too. So as we open our class tonight, let our thought be on abundance. On abundance. Amen. Now, those of you who are listening on the internet, you know that you got here by going to www.truthunity.net. And you also know that by tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon at the latest, a recording of today's class will be available, and the slides are available right now. If you haven't downloaded them yet, I strongly suggest that you do so because they'll help you follow with what we're doing. You can't see it on your screen. Basically, what you can see is me, but you can have those slides in a matter of seconds if you just download the file on www.truthunity.net. Okay, and there's the website address for those of us here, and you'll also find Spiritual Economics as a four-part series on Unity Online Radio back in 2011. I remember that being a great series to do. We're not going to review as much as we did last week, and I do want to remind folks that are listening that please call anytime at 816-252-4242, and we'll get you into a discussion with us that everybody will be able to hear. When you do call, I would ask if you would just mute your computer audio as soon as I pick up the phone. That way we won't all be treated to an infinity of sound. It's that mirror effect, you know, when you look in one mirror facing another mirror and you see an unending sea of mirrors, so also it is when you're speaking on the phone and hearing that sound coming back through your computer speakers and back through again. Well, it gets complicated. Just shut down your volume and we'll all be fine. Remember that nothing sets limits on our prosperity but our consciousness. I was listening to a program on the way over here, Marketplace, and there was a story about a young man who's found a way to make money by gathering particular YouTube videos and putting them in one place, the kinds of things that people want to see. Basically, all he does is set up links to them, and he's made himself a small fortune. There are always ways to earn money. Consciousness is what allows us to keep the money and keep, more important than the money, an overriding sense of abundance. That's what prosperity is. It's an attitude of mind. And of course, the starting point to all prosperity is accepting responsibility for our own thoughts and our own actions. Even if you have been treated unfairly, the fact is that you make progress by accepting your responsibility as clearly and as closely as you can. That way, You're not blaming somebody else. You're not seeing yourself as a victim. The thing about victims is that they are powerless. You are not powerless. Being responsible means having the ability to respond. All right? One of the things that we didn't review last week, and therefore I want to right now, is substance. And I know that people continue to have difficulty with substance. Remember that spiritually, substance is invisible, and yet it is that which stands under everything that appears. It is that invisible energy out of which comes everything that we can see. We have 3D printers now. It's an amazing idea, one that I never would have thought of years ago. They take either a plastic powder or a steel powder or some other kind of powder, and using a pattern, they literally print something. They make a three-dimensional object. Right now, it's frightfully expensive, but there will come a time when it is mass-produced and quite inexpensive. You may remember when fax machines cost many hundreds of dollars and multifunction printers were unheard of, and today they're practically giving them away. So it's simply a question of the technology growing up and becoming more widely available. So substance isn't that, because substance isn't physical at all. Substance is the energy around which ideas gather and eventually result in manifestation. Are we good with that? And you are entitled to all the substance your consciousness can hold. You can't steal it, but you don't have to steal it. You simply appropriate it. Okay? All right. The kingdom is that within you which is your very own inlet that may become an outlet to all there is in God. Yes, Christine? Oh, that's true. I wonder why that is. Okay, here's what we're going to do. It's not showing. Thank you for telling me. Just a moment and we'll get that fixed. It's a function of Windows 8, unfortunately. And hang on. I see what we did, I think. Bear with us, folks. We have a little technical difficulty. Okay, now we see what's on the screen. And now we should, and should's a big word, isn't it? Okay, we'll let it go like this today. Substance is your birthright. So the kingdom is that within you which is your very own inlet that may become an outlet to all there is in God. In other words, it's there. It's available to you. Through consciousness, you learn how to use it. All right? Okay. So we have to claim it. And in order to do that, many of us need to overcome some serious feelings of unworthiness. I know I did. This is something that is a contest that I've been waging with myself for most of my adult life. As a child, I was fed and I believed some very unfortunate ideas about substance, about abundance, about prosperity. I learned that prosperity was not to be trusted, that it was dangerous. It is said somewhere in the Gospels that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. And I really desperately wanted to go to heaven, and I learned that the best way to do that was not to be rich. So I've been working with that the rest of my life, making good progress. But I started with myself in a really big hole, and maybe some of you did too. All right? I am a child of the universe, richly endowed with the fullness of all good. A child of the universe. We get that into our consciousness, then we are really in a much better place. Okay. One thing we did say last week, and I want to say again, the universe owes us a living, but we owe the world a life. In other words, the raw material is all there. It's all ours for the taking. It's as though we went to the most fabulous buffet in the history of the world, walked away hungry, and complained about it. You see, the food was there, but we had to reach out, take the food, and eat it. If we are unwilling to do that, we will not experience abundance. There is activity on our part required. Make sense? Okay. Right where we are is where abundance begins. I don't care if you're headed for bankruptcy court. I don't care where you are. Abundance begins right now with your next thought, and a big element of that thought is the great and full heart that looks around and sees abundance rather than lack. Teddy Roosevelt said, do what you can with what you have right where you are, and there's a song these days, do what you can, do all you can with what you have, with the time you have in the place you are. Do all you can. All right? Okay. Last week we talked about two words that, when they are used the wrong way, can create an unconscious consciousness of lack. And an unconscious consciousness is something that I want to talk about a little bit more. Only and just. When I ask you how much do you have in your wallet, and you say, I only have $1, that's a judgment. If you say, I have $1, that's reporting a fact. If you say, I have no money in my wallet, that's reporting a fact. But if you say, gee, I'm sorry, I don't have any money in my wallet, that is a judgment. Do you see? Yeah. All right. When you give somebody a gift, sometimes we'll say, oh, it's just a little thought. In other words, we deprecate our gift before we even give it to the individual, forgetting that it's their job to determine the value of the gift. That's a whole other story for a whole other day. So when we center our consciousness on what we don't have, then we are subtly creating a consciousness of lack. Do you see? All right. And remember, if you want to call in with a comment or a question, the number is 816-252-4242. Okay. The Apostle Paul says, in all things give thanks. He doesn't say, for all things give thanks. So you don't give thanks for a traffic ticket, for a great big bill, for an illness. You give thanks within those things, because if you look at the second bullet on slide number 11, despite the problems of lack, or even because of them, our real work is to get ourselves recentered in the awareness of the ever-presence of substance. The things that happen to us sometimes knock us away from that awareness, and our work is to get recentered in that awareness. Does that make sense? Regardless of what is going on, to be recentered in the awareness of life, to be recentered in the awareness of abundance, to be recentered in the awareness of order or harmony or anything else. These are divine absolutes that always exist, that are always coming forth from the One. Our work is to tune into them. And we make that tuning in most easily and most smoothly by practicing gratitude. Not gratitude necessarily for something specific, but gratitude. One of my gratitude statements is, I am in tune with the upward progressive movement of life. All right? That is a gratitude statement. And you can think of many others, I'm sure. Okay. The next thing we want to look at is blessing. Slide number 13. What was it about? Oh yeah, we talked about 12 already. Slide number 13, blessing. I can't tell you how much good can come of blessing. And it doesn't matter what you're blessing or why you're blessing it. To bless is to confer prosperity on, to see the highest and the best in something. So when we do that, what we're doing primarily is adjusting our own consciousness. Some of you heard the story of when I was fairly new with the community in Leavenworth, the Unity community in Leavenworth. We were having a workshop one day, and the tripod that we had, the paper, what do they call those? A flip chart. The tripod that we had the flip chart mounted on, we needed to fold it up and put it back in its case. It just didn't want to collapse. A couple of guys were struggling with it, and I was afraid they were going to break it, so I said, gentlemen, let's take a moment and bless it. So we did. We gathered hands around this thing, and I spoke a word of blessing, and after that they just picked that thing up, and it practically put itself in the case. And they looked at me and said, how'd you do that? I said, all I did was give us some space and recenter our thoughts. We were all getting a little bit frustrated. When we let the thing show us how it needs to be, then it comes apart very nicely and goes back to where it needs to go. I thought that was a pretty neat demonstration, honestly, and I didn't want to make them think that I was doing any magic at all, because there's no magic in any of this. What blessing changes is us. It changes our attitude, our thoughts and feelings about a person, about a thing, about a situation. You know, if I have a meeting coming up and I'm concerned about it, if my primary thought is concern, well, I'm poisoning that meeting even before it opens. If instead I begin to bless everyone and everything, every agenda item, the efficiency of the meeting, watch what happens to that meeting. And then on to work. Slide number 15. Work is an experience of growth. And if you're not growing in your job, your best bet is to find a way to grow in your job. We can almost always do that. Even if we're looking for another job, the best thing that we can do is learn to grow in the job we already have. When we do this, one of two things happens. We either learn that this job really will suit us for a while longer, or our work is noticed, and we're picked up for another job. If you say, I do all that I'm paid for, you're getting cheated, because you're not getting all there is to get out of your job. You see? That's a hard lesson for some people, because, yeah, we do work in circumstances where sometimes it seems like the company doesn't care about us, so we stop caring about the company. It becomes a vicious circle that only leads to problems for both the company and for its employees. Okay? All right. I thought I'd get a phone call or two on that one. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, no matter what your work, let it be your own. No matter what your occupation, let what you are doing be organic. Let it be in your bones. In this way, you will open the door by which the affluence of heaven and earth shall stream into you. And I would say it will stream forth from you. And there's an important difference there. There really is. When we totally embody the highest and best about our work, that is what's going to happen. And real success, it isn't getting there. It's earning the right in consciousness to be there. When we've earned the right in consciousness to be there, we have succeeded. I definitely remember a job. I didn't get into it by the back door. I got into it through the front door, but it was a job for which I wasn't ready. And I suffered for a good long time until I was ready to accept that job, to fulfill it responsibly. I did not know enough about the work to do the job with the level of skill that it required, especially since it required managing people. That was something I'd done before, but never on the level that I was being asked to do it. And you know, you look at two people whose name is on the door with a similar job, and you can't tell until you see them do the job just exactly which one has earned the right to be there. Now, there's one more thing that we need to look at before we go on. I got an email last week about one of the things that we said in the last here we go. I'm going to find it. No, that's not there either. Be patient with me a minute. Okay, in the last class, here we go. We said in the last class, faith is really your consent to let your own uniqueness unfold and to let that which is attracted by your uniqueness manifest in your life. Thus, when Jesus said, all things are possible to them that believe, he did not say that a swan can become a duck or that a non-musical person can become a concert pianist. You cannot become something that is not the outforming of your own inner potential. You can only be you. However, you can unfold more of the you that may have been long frustrated. As with the problem in transplant surgery where rejection syndrome, and remember that this was written some years ago, prevents the tissue from taking hold, so you are unable to hold or to fully experience that which has not come out of your own pattern. So the question was about this rejection syndrome. What does this mean? And here's my response. What Eric Butterworth is saying here is that not everyone can accomplish and be everything. Each of us inherits a pattern of gifts and abilities that makes us unique, differing from every other human being. Our greatest success comes when we discover and work to develop our unique gifts, rather than the gifts we wished we had. Too often we fix our vision on gifts that we don't possess and work hard to develop those gifts, meeting only frustration in the process. This is what Butterworth is talking about when he mentions rejection syndrome. If, for example, I believe that being a surgeon would be a wonderful career, but fail to take into account the fact that I do not have a lot of manual dexterity, that I can't do precise work with my hands, I can certainly try to pursue a career as a surgeon, but my likelihood of success isn't high. My most productive course is always to ask, what do I love to do? What do I have a natural talent for doing? Sometimes we might need help answering those questions. Often, though, meditation, reflection, journaling, and asking people who know us well will lead us to the answers we're looking for. And once we've honestly answered those two questions, we can plan our study and our work experience to develop the gifts we really have. Okay? In my own experience, I wanted to be the leader of a great organization at one point. I discovered that was not necessarily my gift. I could probably do it, but I have a greater gift, and that is a gift of encouraging the people who are going to be the great leaders. I've done very well at that. When I tried to do that which was not mine to do, frustration and unhappiness followed. When I do what is mine to do, well, there's a whole different situation. I hope that makes sense, and that was a really good question. And again, I welcome your questions. All right. So now we go on to reversing financial adversity. And let me see if I can get this back the other way. Yeah, it looks like I can. Okay. Missing the mark is one of the ways in which I learned to hit the target, Butterworth says. I say anything worth doing is worth doing badly. All right? Charles Fillmore, the founder of the Unity movement, went broke not once, but twice. And both times he learned something from the experience and bounced back from it. A tragedy does not become a blessing under its own power. A tragedy becomes a blessing by our response to it. Do you see? Now, it's really very interesting in a strange sort of way that after the Boston Marathon bombings, the surgeons who were available were able to be of much more help to the bombing victims, the ones who lost limbs, than they would have been had it not been for all of the lessons that were learned in the Middle East wars. The Middle East wars, where so many suffered, taught lessons, and those lessons are being put into effect today. Every life experience offers a gift. Some people say, well, where are the gifts from the space program? We're not ready to go to other worlds. Well, one gift from the space program that I know about very much is that whenever we have an eye exam, the eye examination technology is greatly enhanced by what we've learned from the space program. And there's a licensed Unity teacher who'd be happy to share the benefits of the space program. Licensed Unity teachers are many things, and this one works for NASA. She is literally a rocket scientist. So when something happens that appears to be a disaster, we can accept the fact of the situation, but not its permanence. It has come to pass. It doesn't define us, all right? We accept it, but we accept it as a changing experience that is on its way out, and something better is on the way in. This is slide number 18. All right? It's not any point of shame to admit a disastrous experience in our life of any kind. As a matter of fact, it can be disastrous to try to pretend it didn't happen. But the main thing to remember is that it has come to pass. It came to pass. The experience is there to be met, but meet it on your terms, from your emerging, from your growing consciousness. Does that make sense? Are we good with that? No questions at all so far tonight. Gosh, we might finish early. But maybe somebody will come up with something to challenge me on. And don't forget, you can call. Okay. Don't let the outer happening squeeze you into its box. In other words, don't be labeled by what happened. Don't allow that. Open your mind to the flow of wisdom and love and good judgment that are always there, no matter how far down the ladder we appear to have fallen, and accept it. Accept the experience and know that something better is on the way for you, because you have the ability to respond, to change your experience. And now, in slide 21, Eric suggests that we stop using the word problem and start using the word project. The problem means something bad, doesn't it? Well, I remember in grammar school we would have problems to do in math every night, and sometimes they were something bad. To call each one a project would have been a little much. We had problems going on through high school, and whenever we hear today problem, we don't think, oh boy, won't this be fun working our way through it. We do, however, look at a project in a much more favorable light, don't we? You know, like, what are we going to do with this room? All kinds of possibilities. Which one shall we pick? What am I going to do with the leisure time I have coming up this week? All kinds of possibilities. Which one will I pick? And what will I learn from what I pick? Of course, too often, we don't decide, and then we discover that the clock ticks inexorably by, and where did that time go? Interesting. Project is always a positive endeavor of development, although I know that at least once or twice in my life I have been referred to as a project for various reasons. And I guess that's okay. Eric said there was an article in the front page of the Journal, the Wall Street Journal, a few years ago that said positive thinking is the way out of our economic malaise. Well, today you'll see more of those kinds of articles. Today, for example, the market went up because of great reports about increasing housing prices. This inspires confidence. So why does it take that kind of news to inspire confidence? I submit, I believe for a long time that the stock markets are basing their results as much on feeling as they are on any legitimate evidence. And there are people who will actually make a lot of money when the market goes down, and I wonder if perhaps they sow some of the terrible stories that we sometimes hear and read. So when people are spreading tales of doom and gloom, we have a secret weapon. LSGBS. If you've downloaded the slides already, that's slide number 23. You know what it stands for. I remember when I first heard about this in the early 1980s. That's when Eric started teaching this. LSGBS. It means, let something good be said. Whenever the discussion turns to the high cost of things and the lagging business of your employer and the frightening cycles of inflation and recession, don't go along with the negative conclusions. Position yourself squarely on the side of the prosperity potential and let something good be said. Here's an example. People can be talking about how, I don't know, the automobile markets are soft, and you can say, I don't know about that, but I do know that the quality of the cars they're making today is remarkable. We buy a car today, it'll last a lot longer than one we bought 20 or 30 years ago. Usually that will annoy somebody who wanted to get a good griping session going on, and we must never say anything positive that we don't know to be true. But we have to ask ourselves, what good is there dwelling on the negativity? What did it ever accomplish? No good that I can see. We address it, certainly, but we find something positive to say. We let something good be said in every situation. All right? Does that make sense? Do you see any situation where it won't work? Is there any place where we can't let something good be said? There's the story of a mob boss whose brother died. You know, organized crime, the mob. And he sought out a priest, and he said to the priest, I'm going to give your church $50,000 if at my brother's funeral you will say that he was a saint. Now, his brother was a gangster like the mob boss was. So the priest thought about it, and he said, all right, I will. And so the funeral came, and he got up to preach his sermon, the priest did, and he said, the man in the casket in front of you today did some terrible things in his life. He stole, he cheated, he even killed people. But compared to his brother, he said, he was a saint. So he won his money. He let something good be said. But it's got to be something good that's genuine, that's real. Oh, Cheney, I gotcha. Yeah, that's an old one. Yes, Christine.
I was just remembering about down in Oklahoma last year when they first...
Hang on just a second. Hi, Mary Lou. Can you hold for just a minute? We've got somebody in the classroom here sharing something with us. I'll put you right on. But okay, good. Don't turn your computer off until I do. Okay.
When they were showing on the news about all that, they were already showing people saying that they were going to rebuild.
Yep.
And they were being so positive, and that was good to hear.
They absolutely were. And I'll give you another example. My beloved New Jersey shore. I was so delighted last week to see the governor of New Jersey join a whole bunch of other people on a beach on a cold, rainy day. They had a 5-mile ribbon that they were cutting that said the Jersey Shore is now open for business. And we've got Mary Lou on the line. Hi, Mary Lou.
Jersey Shore is now open for business.
Turn your sound off on your computer, Mary Lou.
Tom, you asked us for a question that, let's see, you said, you challenged us. Now I can't find the slide.
Okay.
Where there couldn't be, where you would have hard time, let something good be said. Okay. In the news, frequently, recently, little babies have been murdered. So toss out something good be said about the father that murders his 6-week-old baby.
Okay. To say something good about the father who murders his 6-week-old baby is one of the most difficult situations I can think of to say something good. What we can say, and what, although it's painful, we have to say, is that he is no less the image of God than we are. He may not be doing a terrific job of bringing forth the likeness of God that he is, but he cannot, no matter what he does, change his essential nature. That is something good that we can say. And that helps us in the courts, too, because while the crime needs to be punished, we must never stoop to the idea that the person we are punishing for this crime is less than human, because when we do, we drag all of humankind down. Does that make sense, Mary Lou?
That makes sense. I needed to be more specific in my question doesn't deal with the father who did the crime, but with the baby.
Okay.
What good is it for the baby? Let something good be said for the baby that just got murdered in a brutal fashion.
You know, I had that experience or something quite like it once upon a time years ago. I was asked to do a funeral service for a stillborn baby, a 7-month fetus who was born because the baby's father pushed the baby's mother down the flight of stairs and she delivered early. The father was in hiding, not to be found, and the baby was in just a heartbreaking little white casket in front of me. And the family was not English speaking as their first language, and I had to find something positive to say, something that would comfort them. And what I found to say, and maybe this will be helpful and maybe it won't, was that this little soul was never spoiled, never beaten up by any of the challenges of this life existence. She remained in the minds of her mother and her grandparents what she had always been, a pure child of God. I called her one of God's little angels because of the culture of the people I was doing the service for. And I said, and I believed that I knew that along the path of her eternal life, she would have the opportunity to demonstrate and unfold all of her potential, even though now that had been taken from her. I said, in their grief, the blessing for the parents could be, if they chose it, that this child would forever have in their minds all of the potential that she had at the beginning. Now, that's the best I was able to do. There are some questions that are so difficult to answer that I can't do any better than that. Does that help at all?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I'll hang up now and turn my sound back on.
There you go.
Bye.
All right, thanks. This whole idea of letting something good be said might be the single most important idea of the course. When we get to awfulizing, what we are doing is paralyzing our spiritual muscles. We are short-circuiting our spiritual energy. We are redirecting our faith in a very negative direction. Do you see? And that's not something any of us really want to do. And it's not something that we would do consciously. We would not say, well, I'm going to say the heck with it and turn my faith negative. What's the use? It's never going to work. It's going to work. Sometimes it's not immediately apparent how it's going to work. All right? Consciousness is the key. I can't be responsible for what the president, the Congress, or even the mayor of my town does, but I can be responsible for my own consciousness, and I am responsible for my own consciousness. No one else is responsible for my own consciousness. That is where I am the executive director. Okay? All right. Nobody's challenging me. Okay. Earning means learning. Earning the right to be there means learning. And setbacks are usually an important part of learning. If setbacks weren't an important part of learning, this would be a very strange world. Have any of you seen that movie Pleasantville? Remember the movie where there was never any problems? It only rained late at night when everybody was safe inside. Everybody was beautiful. Everybody was their bodies were properly proportioned. I don't know if people ever died. They didn't talk about that. My favorite shot was at the end of boys' gym, where all the boys had a basketball. They all threw them at the basketball hoop, and they went through in a line, one right after the other, every one. Well, that's unrealistic. What do you do when your child comes home? Well, I didn't have a son, but I did have a little brother 16 years younger than I. And one year I found myself coaching his Little League team. And at the end of the game, he seemed overly excited because his team had taken a shellacking. And I said, well, Jim, you can't win them all. And he said, yeah, but we won this one. I said, no, buddy, you didn't. I mean, you lost, and I don't remember what the score was, but it wasn't close. And he got mad at me. He started punching me. He said, of course we won. I said, no, you didn't. So I had to find a way to help him and the other kids accept that adversity without being buried by it, without being totally tuned out. And, of course, our Kansas City Royals right now could use a dose of that. I think they've lost 6 in a row, which is not a good thing. All right. So, security in a changing world. Feeling is the key. If I'm motivated by fear or anxiety, then I mine my roadway into the future with booby traps, Eric Butterworth says. Now, I have an aunt who was famous in the family for preparing her children for catastrophes. She always had them wear sweaters, even in the middle of summer, because she was afraid they would catch a chill. Bless her heart, she's a dear woman. She's still on the planet. And she did have a great deal of concern. Now, her husband passed away when he was only 50, and 3 of her 4 children were born with serious medical problems, which they survived, and they turned into very healthy adults. One day, and this happens, this was incredible, and I thought it could only happen to that particular aunt. A small airplane crashed right in the middle of her block, evacuating the whole block and condemning every building on it from the fire. Now, what's the chance of that happening? I said she should go out and buy some lottery tickets. So should everybody after something like that. That's very unusual odds. Does fear have something to do with attracting those things to us? I know that when I was in Cub Scouts and they talked to us about how to approach animals, they always said, get out of the consciousness of fear. They didn't say it that way. They said, don't let an animal ever know you're afraid of it, as though an 8-year-old boy is going to be very good at that. But that was the advice. All right? The affirmation at the bottom of the screen on slide 28. I am secure, for I know who I am, a richly endowed child of God. I'm secure in all I do, for I know my oneness with the divine process. I'm secure in all I have, for I know my treasure is in my mind, not in my things. I live my life from day to day as if God's supportive substance were as exhaustless and dependable as the air I breathe, which it most certainly is. Now, If you have problems in this area, this might be a prayer treatment for you to copy out onto a piece of paper or a card or onto your smartphone and carry it around with you. Use it every day. Use it every day until you really, really feel it. Again, we aren't saying that difficult things won't happen, and we aren't saying that an affirmation like this is going to bulletproof you against them. What we are saying is that consciousness is what gets us through these experiences. That's what we're saying. It wasn't from Eric Butterworth that I first learned that everything that humankind does has as its primary motivation either protection or safety or growth. Generally, you can't have both in equal measure as your primary goal. Now, it used to be that life was really quite dangerous physically for the earliest humans. Even today, there are many animals on this planet that could cheerfully kill us. But we have something that they don't have, and that is our intellect, our ability to reason. We call it, we say that we have dominion over the animals. So the human creature, Eric says, survived because his defense was in his creative ability, in the intuitive flow of ideas, in his spiritual dimension, no matter how primitively that spiritual dimension showed up. All right? Imagine if we'd always tried to be safe at all costs. Would we ever have come out of the caves? I don't think so. Would we ever have ventured out of sight of land on the primitive ships that early humans built? That would have been a tremendous risk. Even on some of the early maps, when they got to the edge of what the map makers had charted, there would be a notice that would say, "Here there be monsters." And if you've ever taken an ocean voyage where you've been out of sight of land on all sides, of course you probably were surrounded by a big healthy ship, but think about that. Nothing but water. I've seen people who were freaked out by it on an ocean liner, could hardly wait till the boat hit the dock. One fellow told me, he said, as soon as I can get down that gangplank, I'm going to have my luggage with me and I'm heading for the airport. He just did not feel safe on a ship. So, when people think only of being safe, they stifle the urges of personal growth and advancement. Now, I'm blessed that no one in this spiritual community of Unity of Independence has told me that they think I'm an idiot for riding a motor scooter as much as I do. There may be some who are thinking it, but no one has said it, at least not to me. However, when I went to get my permit before I got the license, the sheriff's deputy who gave me the permit said, "Thank you for being part of our organ donor program." And I said, "Oh, I did sign the organ donor program, didn't I?" He said, "Oh, you didn't get it," he said to me. He said, "I think everybody who rides a motor scooter is a potential organ donor." And, "Oh," I said, and I just said, "Thank you, but no thank you." In my mind, I don't accept that gift. Yes, we hear reports of people riding motorcycles getting killed. People get killed doing all kinds of things. You can get killed sleeping at home in your bed under certain circumstances. Safety or growth, that's what we have to be looking at. So, the millionaire consciousness, Catherine Ponder wrote a lot about the millionaire consciousness. And when we talk about it, what we often forget is the risks that people have had to take to develop that millionaire consciousness. It starts with a belief that they can do it, and it continues with a willingness to do whatever it takes to get there. And sometimes what it takes to get there is not something that you or I would want to do. As a matter of fact, I remember once when I was an associate minister in Sacramento, California, I don't remember the speaker's name, It was my job to pick up guest speakers at the airport, take them to their hotel, and host them while they did their workshops. And this man, on the way back from the hotel, from the airport to the hotel, he said, I can give you the gist of my workshop in a couple of sentences. And his workshop was the secret to getting absolutely anything you want. And the secret, he said, was being willing to do absolutely whatever it took to get it. And he gave an example. It's a beautiful example. Suppose you work for a retail organization. A lot of people do. That's the biggest, that's the most common job in the United States today, working in some form of retail. And suppose your goal is to be the manager of a store of the company that you work for. And you say, that's my number one goal. And along comes the district manager and says, we've got a store for you. You say, wow, terrific. Then they add, it's in Mississippi. And you say, but I don't want to live in Mississippi. Well, the question is, what do you want more? Do you want to be a store manager, or do you want not to live in Mississippi? See, there's the issue. You have to ask yourself, what do you want more than anything else? Now, for a lot of people, and they're honest about this, their real goal is to have a happy and satisfying life right where they are. They don't wish to move. And that's fine. If that's what you want, you can find the things to do that will get it for you. But if you want to move out and up, you have to be willing to do what it takes. Now, in 1983, I had a burning desire. Actually, it was 1982, a burning desire to be a Unity minister. And becoming a Unity minister, at that point, there was really only one way to do it, and that meant moving to Missouri for a period of 2 years. Now, I was living in a place that I dearly loved, Miami, Florida. I was a part of a church community that I was just thrilled to be a part of. And I had a good job, but I wanted to be a Unity minister. And what that required was to take everything I owned and my family, put the family in the cars and the stuff in a truck, and drive to Kansas City, to drive to Lee Summit. We didn't hesitate because we really wanted to come. After we got here, at first we didn't like it at all. I didn't like school, and we certainly didn't like Missouri. I pronounced the name of the state wrong, as a matter of fact, putting the accent on the first syllable instead of the second one, calling it Missouri. And it's funny, after I left, and I was so glad to leave, I came back 5 years later and thought I'd stay for 5 years to do my bit for Unity education in the ministerial school. Well, 23 years later, I'm still living in Missouri, only now my wife and I really did an inventory. Where do we want to live? Where do we want to settle down for our golden years? Guess what? Jackson County, Missouri. Go figure. You know, when you're willing to do whatever it takes to get what you want more than anything else in the world, sometimes you get some surprising revelations. So what's my motivation? Is it security or is it adventure? And the question of insurance always comes up when we have these discussions. And there are those who say that having insurance means that you don't trust the process. If that were the case, then Unity School would have become suspect a long time ago, because for their full-time employees, they offer health insurance, and had it for a long time. I have health insurance. I'm not going to give it up. There are those who do not have health insurance, and I respect them. For me, health insurance means that I can focus on being healthy and not on paying bills. And I noticed that there has been a shift in the focus in health insurance, both the health insurance I had and the health insurance I have now. It's all about health. As a matter of fact, the Medicare policy that I have includes a free membership to a health club. Now I need to make time in my week to go. It isn't about illness, it's about wholeness, how to find it, how to keep it. So Eric says that if you have a concern about buying insurance, you probably ought to buy the insurance, and that will alleviate your concern. If we plan and conserve and keep our thoughts centered in God as our limitless resource of good, and our way will be filled with success and fulfillment. It doesn't mean that we have to rely on public charity to get through life. If we are reliant on God, we will always find the way. I hear stories about that all the time. And now we come to another really, really powerful story, and for this, we're going to go to Scripture. We're going to go to Mark 9. This is a story that takes place in the Gospel according to Mark right after the Transfiguration. The Transfiguration was an amazing event. It shows up only in, I believe it shows up only in Mark. I'll have to check that to make sure. But Jesus takes with him Peter, who represents faith, and James and John, love and wisdom, goes up to a mountain, and there he's transfigured, just as Moses was transfigured when he was talking to God. And the disciples who are there see Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus there. How they recognize Moses and Elijah, I don't know. They were terrified. And Jesus told them not to tell anyone what they'd seen. Well, when they come down from the mountain, they meet a man with a, well, the son has epilepsy, but they didn't know what epilepsy was in those days. They thought it was demon possession. So here's the passage, and it starts on slide 33. When they came back to the disciples, that's Jesus and Peter, James, and John, they saw a large crowd around them and some scribes arguing with them. Scribes were people who were very meticulous about their understanding of law. Immediately, when the entire crowd saw him, they were amazed and began running up to greet him. And he asked them, "What are you discussing with them?" And one of the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought you my son, possessed with a spirit which makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it slams him to the ground, and he foams at the mouth and grinds his teeth and stiffens out. I told your disciples to cast it out, and they could not do it." So there's our problem, or our project, if you will. And he, Jesus, answered them and said, "O unbelieving generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring him to me." They brought the boy to him. When he saw him, immediately the spirit threw him into a convulsion, and falling to the ground, he began rolling around and foaming at the mouth. Typical marks of a grand mal seizure, a very serious grand mal seizure. And he, Jesus, asked the father, "How long has this been happening to him?" And the father said, "From childhood. It has often thrown him both into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." And Jesus said to him, "If you can, all things are possible to him who believes." And here in the earliest of the Gospels, Jesus is putting it right back on the questioner. Let's find the resources within you to get this work done. Immediately the boy's father cried out and said, "I do believe, help my unbelief." Now, this question, this statement, this admission is the starting point for growth. The father is saying, I've taken my own belief as far as it will go. I am at the limit. I cannot go farther. Help me. Help me get to the next phase. All right? You see that? You see how powerful it can be. When we admit our vulnerability, I've gone as far as my humanness can take me. Now I'm looking to Jesus, who represents the Christ, the higher understanding. Help me go the next step. When Jesus saw that a crowd was rapidly gathering, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You deaf and mute spirit, I command you, come out of him and do not enter him again." Now, a couple things here. I just wish that the crowd hadn't been gathering, because I would have liked to see Jesus talk the man through this in the story. Did this actually happen? I don't know. But what this is a demonstration of the writer of Mark's belief in what Jesus could coach people to do. The other thing that puzzles me, and this only began puzzling me as I prepared for tonight's class, why would Jesus talk to a deaf and mute spirit? You couldn't either see him or hear him, but somehow he talked to it. So I'd have to do some word study on that deaf and mute. After crying out and throwing him into terrible convulsions, it came out, and the boy became so much like a corpse that most of them said he's dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and raised him, and he got up. When he came into the house, his disciples began questioning him privately, "Why could we not drive it out?" And he said to them, "This kind cannot come out by anything but prayer." And what is prayer? Prayer is a state of mind that, first of all, beholds the highest and best in every person at every time. Do we see that? Prayer isn't pleading, prayer is knowing. And we build our consciousness of prayer by staying in a consciousness of prayer as completely and constantly as we can. Make sense? All right. I've come to the conclusion that the primary metaphor for all of Eric Butterworth's teaching is the flow. He sees this, you see it in every one of his books, and the image gets stronger and stronger through the later ones. He traces the flow back to Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, who says the person who masters the flow of life masters life. So, what Eric is saying, whatever you do in the way of investments, and that can be everything from a passbook savings account to God knows what, do it out of the consciousness of the divine flow. You take a Bernard Madoff, and he wasn't doing it out of the consciousness of the divine flow. He was doing it to line his own pockets. And he did express amazement that it took people so long to catch him. Keep yourself centered in God so that you do not flutter like a flag in the breeze when the Dow Jones report is published every day. Keep your faith in the continuity of God's ever-present substance, no matter what the condition of the market or of your stock. That's not to say hold on to a bad stock as it rides all the way down to zero, but it does say don't be guided by the day-to-day little twitchy changes that happen. Don't be guided by senseless emotion. Be guided by reason. And this statement at the bottom of slide 36 is one that we used to have on our paychecks at Unity back when there were physical paychecks. I give thanks to God as the source of my supply, our paychecks read, and I bless Unity School as a channel through which it flows. That's what it said. Always remember that your good comes to you through many channels, and you are a channel of good to others. Do you see? So true security is in worthiness, not in worth. Now that's going to get a lot of people saying, uh-oh, because you know about my problems with feelings of unworthiness. And I'll say yes, and if you're going to do some spiritual growing, that is a wonderful, wonderful place to begin. To invite those feelings of unworthiness to be transformed as you renew your mind. They're not the truth about you. And do you realize that a feeling of unworthiness exists to protect you from going lower than you think you already are? In other words, if we know we're unworthy and we just shy away from stepping up in any way, we're not going to get slapped down. Unworthiness is not true. It's not true about anybody. How do I know you're worthy? Because you exist. All right? If you're completely locked into your money and possessions, your net worth, Butterworth says you may well be unconsciously trying to cover your unworthiness by doing flashy things. And the more security you require to cover your unworthiness, the more you feel insecure. Thus, despite properties, stock portfolio, and a good income, you live almost frantically attuned to the economic indicators, all because you have a secret sense of unworthiness. If you really feel worthy, you can let it all go and put the whole weight of your faith on the everlasting arms. If you find a deficiency through this test, you can do something about it, and you should. So if you come up with feelings of unworthiness, there is something to work with. There is something very powerful to work with. And it's a reason to rejoice because you finally uncovered those feelings, you know them for what they are, and you know that they can be transformed. Okay? And with that, we come to the end of our slides for tonight. What questions or comments does anybody have? Remember, you can call us at 816-252-4242. I'd rather have that than an email question, because if you call me in, we can talk about it with everybody, and we can do it right now. Any comments or questions about what we worked on tonight? Anything that particularly showed up as important for you? Anybody? Vicki?
I just wanted to show that.
Which one?
Not too back. That one.
Okay. One forward?
There.
Okay.
I just want to copy.
You want to copy it down. I give thanks to God as the source of my supply, and I bless whatever the channel is as a channel through which it may manifest. Okay. See, if God is the source of your supply, what do we know about God? Is God likely to go out of business? Geez, I hope not. Wouldn't that be the source? Wouldn't that be the topic of a fun story, when God went out of business? All right. Now, it's true that we've been through some tough economic times in this country, all over the world, and many of us have taken a financial beating. And it's a question of how we respond to those circumstances. Do we say, wow, a new lesson to learn? Some people who thought they'd be out playing golf every day are now working at Walmart just to maintain a lifestyle. That's not the end of the world. As a matter of fact, it's been demonstrated that people who don't, quote, retire in the traditional sense tend to live longer lives. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't plan to ever retire in the sense of sitting around doing nothing. I modify my activities, I just did, but to stop working altogether, that's something I find it difficult to fathom. So that was a good one for you. Anybody else?
I do
Yeah.
have a question.
Sure, Christine.
I wasn't here when you had all those questions asked. I think you said 11:30 Sunday morning.
Oh, yes, the Ask the Minister Anything. We've got a couple of minutes. Go ahead and ask me one now.
God,
Mm-hmm.
a being or energy or what? How do you describe?
I describe God by saying that God is for you whatever you need for God to be in a particular moment. Now let's go back to Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. No, I'm in the wrong chapter. Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. God said to Moses, when Moses said, "Who shall I say sent me?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am." And he said, "Thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me to you." Now, I am who I am can also be translated, I will be what I will be. One of the things we know about God is that no human mind can grasp all of the infiniteness of God. So each one of us has an understanding of God that works for us until it doesn't, very much in the way that when you were growing up, a pair of shoes might be fine on the first day of summer, but by the time you went back to school, they were pinching your toes. Your understanding of God pinches your toes. I can share my understanding with you of God with you up to a point. I believe that God is beingness, or being itself, not a being. What does that mean? Well, here it becomes difficult to tell you. Emily Cady in Lessons in Truth says, I can't give God to you, and you can't give God to anyone else. What we can do is support each other as we discover God for ourselves and move toward a greater awareness of oneness with whatever we conceive God to be. Does that help? Okay.
Nobody asked that.
Not that day, I don't think. But I'm always ready with that answer. Anything else before we close?
Well, I'm going to share this with you real quick.
Sure, Cheney.
As I was backing out of the drive tonight, I was thinking about my checking account.
Okay.
And earlier on, it seemed like I was doing really well, and I was being able to hold on to some kind of big chunks of money, and they were starting to build up. And as I was backing out of the driveway tonight, I was thinking, you know, that's just not happening for me right now. And I don't understand why. Because I'm not really doing anything different. I've got the same part-time job. I still try to donate to the same things I did before.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way. It seems like I'm doing all the same stuff, but my money is not there like it was earlier.
Okay.
And as we were sitting here tonight talking, I had this realization back when all that good flow was happening.
Yes.
I had this picture that I held in my mind. And it may seem kind of funny, but this is how it happened. I had this picture of angels at the bank, and their job was to make sure that I had that good flow of income in my life.
Uh-huh.
And I had that picture in my mind. That is the only thing that has changed.
Okay.
And I got away from that, and I started trying to do this myself, trying to make this happen myself,
Well,
instead of holding that good flow. Honestly, that's the only thing that's different, and for some strange reason, it has made a difference. And I was thinking about that just as I'm going out of the drive.
well, I appreciate you sharing that, and I'm going to say two things to you. First is, if I were you, I'd probably invite those angels back, and I would ask them a question. What are you trying to tell me? Okay? What are you trying to tell me? Cheney was saying just now that she has not been experiencing the same positive flow that she was experiencing because, well, she didn't know why, and she checked to see what was different, and what was different was that it used to be that she would see angels around the bank. She would see angels around the bank and protecting her investments. And so I suggested that she invite those angels back and ask them what they're trying to tell her. There's a message there. There's a message there. Now, each of us experiences the divine flow differently. And I don't know what to tell you about that other than what I just shared. But, you know, when you try to do it by purely human will, you may succeed, but your success will be temporary, and you will usually be looking over your shoulder. All right? Okay. I think it's time for us to bless our offering, and tonight I'm going to look at slide 36 again, and I've just been told by text that some of the slides are cut off at the bottom. We're going to have to look and see what that's about. I don't know how that could have happened when they were transmitted in the PowerPoint slides in the PowerPoint show that we sent. But Let's bear this in mind. Everybody is in a position to give tonight, whether it's money or the rest of the gift. The whole gift includes every thought, word, and action that you and I dedicate to the upliftment of humankind. So, first of all, your gift is those thoughts, those words, and those actions. And secondly, your gift includes whatever money you may be giving this evening. If you're here in the sanctuary, we have a basket. If you are at home, truthunity.net has a love offering button on its home page, and unityindependence.com has one also. So we give to the channel of good through which we've been fed. Unityindependence.com has a donate button, and truthunity.net has one too. And of course, we always take love offerings, and that is not required for participation in the class of financial offering. I will say, though, that you are required to be conscious in your giving of your thoughts, words, and actions. And so, we remember that God is the source of our supply, and we think of all of the channels through which it flows, and then we recognize that each one of us is a channel through which abundance flows to others. And with each turn of the way, each time the abundance passes through one more set of hands, it seems to increase by the divine love and the divine wisdom with which it's passed along. We give in love, we receive in love, and our awareness of divine abundance grows. Thank you for being part of tonight's class. I look forward to seeing you at the next one. Namaskar.